All right, everybody. Today we're talking about additive manufacturing, and our guest today is Sherry Monroe, the executive director of the Manufacturer Green Trade Association. Sherry is a passionate advocate for the environmental and economic benefits of additive manufacturing, a technology that's revolutionizing industries by optimizing supply chain, minimizing waste, and driving sustainability. So perhaps before we dive into welcome, first off, Sherry, maybe define what is additive manufacturing for those in the audience that may need a refresher there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is a great opportunity. I'm really glad to be chatting with you today. So, additive manufacturing is really a whole set of technologies around 3D printing. So,
Hmm.
many people are familiar with 3D printing. They've maybe seen somebody that has a small desktop 3D printer in their basement and they can print little gadgets. But really, additive manufacturing is becoming more and more of a key player in manufacturing, distribution, supply chains, and addressing all of the key issues that we've been dealing with over the last couple of years.
Got it. I'm an engineer, so I like to think in terms of adding and subtracting, right? So
Yeah,
additive is that
yeah,
process of adding by building layer by layer from digital models, right? And then
right.
maybe subtracting material as in, as opposed to the subtract material in a CNC machines when you cut and create that.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of cutting material away, you're
Mhm.
adding, like you said, layer by layer, building a part. And that's why it's called additive versus subtractive. When my
Mhm.
dad was a machinist many years ago, he wouldn't have had that term because there was no alternative to subtractive at that time. But yeah, it's that process. And not only can you print 3D print plastics,
Mhm.
you can 3D print metals, ceramics, wood, all kinds of materials. So there's really almost no application that you can't do with 3D printing.
Got it. Thank you for the definition there. Now, maybe you have several members in your association. Talk about some of the latest advancements in additive manufacturing and why do they
Yeah.
matter to the industries today?
Yeah, so some of the things people may not realize are additively manufactured that they're already engaged with. If anybody has ever gotten the Invisalign little trays that move your teeth around, those are all 3D printed because they can do the iteration, change each one just a little bit and print a new one. Without molds. If you have an iPhone 16, it has 3D printed parts in it. But probably even a more maybe truly impactful one is if you know anybody today getting a hip replacement or that kind of medical implant, chances are that is 3D printed. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is they can be somewhat customized. They can be very much customized
Mhm.
um, to exactly fit you, but also the types of structures that they're able to print are much better for bone growth into the implant and really deliver better patient outcomes.
Thank you for putting it in a very good example with the hip. I just went through my mom with a hip surgery, and I think that
Yeah,
was a customized because they were saying it was because it was a second time around, they had to make some adjustments
sure.
there. So,
Yeah,
now I should say we got connected in the context of sustainability and manufacturing
right.
event that's happening in Anaheim
Yeah,
next week, and maybe talk about the role of sustainability playing adoption of the 3D printing and how do you
sure.
make that business case for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple different ways that additive manufacturing really leads to better sustainable, more sustainable manufacturing and better environmental outcomes. And we really look at this as opposed to, sort of being the economic and the environmental being at odds with each other, that really they track together. If you're saving money on energy, on material, reducing overproduction, things like that. Those are great economic drivers, but those are also great environmental drivers. And the way that additive manufacturing really leads to more sustainable manufacturing, like it's easy to think initially, okay, we're not cutting all this material away that's going on the shop floor, and that can be true. It can also be quite energy intensive if you're printing metals. It usually involves a laser that's actually fusing metal powder together. And so the impacts kind of shift exactly where, where you're using energy and that type of thing. But some of the benefits that you can get, like I actually have a part here I can show you. This is a part that goes actually on a Boeing 767. This is the traditional machined part, and this is
Mhm.
the additively manufactured part. It does the exact same job, but as you can see, this one looks like there's a lot less metal here, and that's true because it has the type of optimization you can do that this part actually provides better performance, but it's significantly lightweighted. So,
Mhm.
that's easy to figure. You're using less metal to make it. Then you put it on an airplane. And when you're lightweighting an airplane, that means less jet fuel, which means you're saving money on jet fuel and you're having a smaller carbon footprint for that flight. So that's just one example. Another thing that can happen with additive manufacturing is what we call part consolidation. Right now, when you have a big system or an engine or something, it's divided into different pieces and parts. And usually the segmentation of those parts is based on manufacturing constraints. Like if you're boring a hole through a big block of metal, you can't make it go in like a curly Q, like it has to go straight through. With additive manufacturing, you can print it and you can print those channels in there and be able to do it all in one part. The value of one part is you don't have to have all that extra material where things get bolted together or welded together. And also, when you don't have those joinings where parts come together, you usually have better performance because that's where it's going to fail, is at those seams. So you can get not only better environmental impact on the production of the part, but the part actually perform better, meaning it gets replaced less often. That's great economics, that's great environmental impact. But one of the biggest things that I think often it gets missed when we're doing this sort of part for part comparison is what this can do for inventory and distribution and those kinds of issues. Because in traditional manufacturing, we assume that you need to make things in really big quantities because that's where the cost bottoms out, right? Your most efficient cost, we've got to make a lot of this one part. And so quite often we maybe have the same part we're using across multiple platforms because we're trying to take advantage of that economy of scale. Additive manufacturing, that cost drops, bottoms out much quicker. Instead of having to make 10,000 of a part, maybe you make them 100 at a time. And the part might be slightly more expensive to print it, but if I don't have to make 10,000 of them, I don't have to inventory them. I
Right.
don't have to eventually, they don't become obsolete and go in the waste bin. So there's a lot of those types of enterprise-wide factors that additive manufacturing can really deliver for a business, where I think really is where the magic is. It's not so much in the printing, it's what it allows your business to do across time, across geographies, and across designs.
Right. So, and to your point about earlier about the part of an airplane, right? So if you're flying this into Bucharest and you don't have all the things in the inventory in Bucharest, you can
Yeah,
print one of those and ship that airplane right back, put it back in the air. You don't have to wait for a part to come
yeah.
back with another airplane to get it fixed.
Absolutely.
Makes
And
it.
a great example of that right now is in Ukraine,
Mhm.
right? They need parts there for all kinds of equipment. If you have a piece of equipment, an airplane, a tank, or whatever it might be that's sitting idle because it needs one part, quickly they're printing parts over there. And that applies not only in a situation like Ukraine, but think about a oil rig out in the ocean. They need a part. They
Right.
don't have to inventory all those parts. Essentially, they just need the printer and the powder, and they can kind of make whatever part they need.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for those examples. And maybe just if you have any examples like how additive aligns with the industriality and opportunities that may exist in this area. I know you've touched a little bit on, particularly when it impacts the supply chain, because that's all connected industry, but anything else
Yeah.
that particularly applies to the industriality?
Yeah, so there are a lot of aspects of not only the part production, but
Mhm.
also the manufacturing processes themselves.
Mhm.
So many companies are using additive manufacturing internally for their spare parts, for redesigning, even tools for traditional manufacturing. Being able to, as we had spoken earlier, back in the day, you would have to wait maybe 3 months to get a mold to come in, and you hoped when you got it that it was right, or if it got damaged, that lag time was really significant. Well, now for a mold, it might be, okay, we can have it next week. Oh, it's not quite right. Okay, give me a day, I can reprint it. And so it's not only about additive manufacturing, it's about also making traditional manufacturing much more efficient, which allows you to really take advantage of the types of data that you're getting around demand, around disruptions to transportation. Companies can be so much more responsive in what they're doing to respond to these impacts, whether they're negative or positive, right? A ship getting stuck in a canal slows you down, but also discovering there's great demand for a part or a product you hadn't anticipated. Being able to respond to that really quickly is certainly something that additive manufacturing can facilitate.
Great examples. Now, can you talk a little about some of the common misconceptions about additive manufacturing, and how does your
Sure.
organization help to address and dispel them?
Yeah, so really the best way to dispel any sort of misconceptions is real use cases, right? People want to know who's actually doing this, what is the outcome, how is it helping them operate better? And so those are great examples. One of the companies we worked with recently here in the US is Target, right? The big retailer where we all probably spend too much money. Target has been a great partner. They're one of our members. And what they were looking at, actually, they've used additive manufacturing, 3D printing for many years for rapid prototyping, right? They want to sell something new in their store. They can quickly print out an example of what that's going to look like. But they really wanted to start also using it in their distribution centers. They have these massive distribution centers of boxes coming in and boxes going out of all the stuff you normally see at Target, Gatorade and Pampers and all the stuff. Well, one of the things they were dealing with is some of that equipment is getting older, and spare parts are becoming more difficult to get, or those spare parts have to be overnighted in maybe from Europe. Their ability to be able to respond quickly, print a part that they need, a spare part, and get their equipment, those big conveyors back up and going again is significant for them. They know down to the minute what it costs them to have that system down. And so that's one of the ways they've really been able to look at this from a operations side. And it was interesting. Initially, they were kind of looking at this just from an operational perspective, but weren't so much thinking about the sustainability side. And I said, well, the sustainability, like you're thinking, how do we get this equipment back up and running? And I'm saying, but if you don't have to have parts shipped in from Europe, if you don't have to scrap this older equipment, you can have it run for another year or maybe a couple more years. That has big economic implications, has big environmental implications. So really being able to look at that is really important.
Thank you for that. Now, I know hearing you talk about those things, it looks like it's very well adopted in some industry. I'm curious
Right.
if there is any, so this might be a tougher question, but it's like, is additive ready for widespread adoption across industries, and what sort of progress signals its readiness?
Yeah. So actually it's being used across industries right now. Quite often people don't realize it because it's either being used operationally or it's one component going in a piece of equipment. There are parts in cars that are being 3D printed right now. Medical devices is a very big one. Dental is a very big one where everything is happening that way. But I think, there was initially some hype, like you're going to be able to, like Star Trek, you're going to be able to have this thing print whatever you want, and it'll print your lunch for you. So there's people get excited about technology. And so it always takes a little bit for industry to catch up with that. But I think for companies that are looking to adopt additive, the equipment is expensive. There's no doubt about that. But like a lot of technologies, companies can get the advantages of additive without necessarily bringing it in-house initially. There's a
Right.
level of expertise, awareness, training, the equipment itself that may not be where you want to jump in initially, right? Because you're not sure. There's so many different technologies, different materials. But there are plenty of contract manufacturers that can provide the expertise, be able to design parts for additive, and be able to do that work so companies can take advantage of it, just like they do with many other technologies, right? They don't do everything in-house. They do what their core capabilities and competencies are in-house, and then they bring these other things in from outside. And additive is absolutely one of those, because there is a factor of understanding, how do we leverage this technology? We're not going to just reprint the exact same part. How do we
Right.
make it better? How do we take advantage of these capabilities? There's no point in just reproducing the exact same part in the same quantity, in the same location, like, and then expect a different result, right? Isn't that the definition of insanity? But, we use additive to do things better, whether it's a better part or being able to produce in smaller quantities or being able to distribute production so you're less vulnerable to disruptions.
Mhm.
All of those things are certainly possible through additive.
And it's a good segue into the next question. I know you've touched a little bit, like, what's an advice that you'd give to companies that are new to additive manufacturing to help them successfully integrate this technology? You've talked about perhaps relying on some partners initially, but anything else that you would
Yeah,
add?
there are partners like that can help integrate and be sort of technology agnostic, right? And help you address what your needs are. A lot of universities, especially around the world, across Europe, here in the US, there are a lot of universities that have centers where business can come in and really explore different additive technologies, understand how this would work for them, be able to print some parts, see how that works, get them tested. That's always an issue, is getting parts tested to make sure that they feel comfortable with the quality. But those are some great ways of going
Mhm.
about it. But I would say in a lot of ways, you just jump in some way. Pick something that you want to go with, but also reach out to other companies that are already doing additive manufacturing. I would say for many large manufacturers today, they probably have some level of additive manufacturing that's going on in their organization right now that really just needs a little bit more exposure, especially from a business side, saying, hey, we want to be able to do this. How can our additive department help us with this? And really kind of match up the technical capabilities with the business needs and really bring that together.
I know we're almost out of time, but I want one quick question is like, what advancements in the additive manufacturing excite you the most, and how do you envision them shaping the future of sustainable industry? Is it the fact that the cost of the machine becomes low? What exactly
Yeah.
excites you the most?
Yeah, the exciting thing to me is there's just becoming greater awareness of really how to leverage these technologies from a business perspective. That's my background, is business and applying technology to business situations. And how do we make this more efficient? How do we make it more profitable, more sustainable? Sustainable means better environmental and societal outcomes, but it also means the viability of the company, and really being able to apply that. Because what we've seen over the last few years between plagues, geopolitical issues, weather crises happening around the world, we've got to be more nimble, we've got to be more resilient. We need to have greater control over supply chains, whether that means reshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring, or just having more control over what's going on. That's going to become increasingly important, I think, for every business around the world. And I'm really excited about what additive manufacturing can bring to every one of those issues.
Thank you, Sherry, for sharing this insight. Also, if you're in the audience, feel free to leverage the hashtag you see on the screen, and we'll get Sherry to answer them. Also, feel free to join Sherry in Anaheim during Sustainable in Manufacturing, February 4th and 5th, and look forward to host you again soon.
Yeah, that would be great. This has been a great conversation. Thanks so much.